start with the race to rescue hurricane survivors in full force. Florida's governor saying any death from Milton now is preventable. With millions still in the dark, debris everywhere, and new frustrations from people hit hard by tornadoes who say they're not getting the help they need. We are live across the area. We're also live outside a mine in Colorado after a deadly elevator malfunction stranded tourists for hours underground. The big unanswered questions that we have tonight. Then officials in Texas digging into what caused a deadly chemical leak in an oil plant. What we're learning tonight about the victims. Plus, a movie Donald Trump probably won't see. It opens tonight. The details of how he tried to stop this movie about himself and his former mentor from ever seeing the light of day. And then in tonight's original, how Seaweed can fight climate change by cutting down on those infamous cow emissions. That's later on in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin, in for Hallie tonight. And as we're coming on the air, it is a race to rescue and rebuild in Florida, as officials are warning people not to let their guard down in the aftermath of the hurricane. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis telling people that they're now in a period where deaths are preventable if people are aware of the biggest dangers officials are working to address. Down power lines and flooded communities. More than 2 million people are in the dark tonight. And we are just learning in the last couple of minutes or so that the number of people killed by this storm has gone up to 17 as those who survived start to pick up what is left of their homes, especially in the hard-hit coastal communities like Hillsborough County, where officials say they haven't even seen the worst of it yet. This is what the streets there look like today. Officials saying they're worried because this river has still not crested, meaning it still hasn't actually reached its highest level yet. And there's also the issue of floodwaters contaminated by sewage. Tonight, things are starting to open back up. You got Tampa Bay International Airport. That was the first flight out early this morning. And then access to the barrier islands, which took a direct hit from Milton, now open as well. You're taking a look at all the traffic, by the way, from evacuees driving back to their homes. On Sunday, the president is going to head to Florida to visit affected areas. We have got Guad Venegas out in Fort Myers for us. Sam Brock is on the ground for us in Punta Gorda as well. Sam, start us off, if you will. The mayor of Punta Gorda today saying that in her 28 years of living there, she has never seen storm surge like what she has seen in the last couple of weeks. This is a city that was hit particularly hard by Hurricane Ian, Helene, and now Milton. It is almost historic.
And also, I would say jarring in the sense, you know, when you think about Hurricane Ian, those were 15 to 17-foot storm surges in places. I don't know, Yasmin, whether or not that was true in Punta Gorda. Certainly not reaching those levels this time around, but high enough to provide images like this. I mean, that's a boat that's capsized and sitting there on a 45-degree angle at a marina with just all sorts of the dock and marina infrastructure here curled up and turned around as if like a tornado ripped right through. That just speaks to the power of water, and also, as the mayor here was speaking to, just the severity of this particular weather event. I will also say, just let's get the top lines right now. Total number of deaths, at least 17. That is up from 16. More than 2 million people and businesses without power right now. So we've seen significant progress from the 3.5 million we were at a couple of days ago. But still, that's an awful lot of Floridians, probably 4 or 5 million people total when you consider all the households that are involved there. And then the water rescues. You hit on this a second ago. I mean, this is outrageous what we're seeing right now in Hillsborough County. You had 91 people rescued near the Alafia River earlier today. That was just the start of things there. 25 feet of water. That's where the river had crested and is supposed to come down eventually to below major flood stage on Monday. Obviously, it's Friday. We got a ways to go. You had also in other locations, you know, Hillsborough, Pasco County, 135 elderly residents who were moved from Bradenton, moved to Hillsborough, and ended up having to be evacuated a second time and rescued. So just imagine the sort of traumatization that's going on for so many of those folks. It is wild, and just the visuals here alone speak to really volumes of this event.
I'm wondering, Sam, how officials are kind of assessing the aftermath when it comes to lives saved, right? Because we knew there were a lot of evacuation warnings ahead of Milton. It feels like officials were optimistic that a lot of folks got out and heeded those warnings in comparison to the evacuations ahead of Helene.
Not even optimistic. I mean, certified, right? There's just no question whatsoever that lives were saved because people heeded those warnings. I think more than anything else, not just the history here, but Helene, what that did a couple of weeks ago, rushing water, sewage water, major wind damage to a lot of these homes, forced people to reassess what they were doing. And the reason that I say that, Fort Myers Beach, I was on Fort Myers Beach yesterday. They didn't have a single search and rescue call in an area that has 5,000 to 6,000 people. Then you have Minnesota Key, and we're getting brand new images in tonight. We're going to show you that for Nightly News. This is an area that is about 20, 30 minutes from where I am, due west, out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. You had thousands of people that can't get back on. I mean, they are not being allowed back on.
Wow.
But the reality is they all, for the most part, evacuated. And I want to point your attention, Yasmin, to a conversation I just had with two gentlemen in a truck waiting for authorities there in Charlotte County to try to get back onto the island just to see what their properties look like at this hour and the sobering reality of what that might bring. Take a listen.
I've worked my entire life to buy these properties. This is everything I have in the world. So to lose all that, I lose my retirement, I lose my business, I lose my income, I lose my house. So
your entire life savings is wrapped up in those homes.
Yes. Yes.
Gosh.
And he's most certainly not the only one, Yasmin. In terms of a deadline right now to get people back on the island, there is none, and we're just waiting to find out when this might actually happen.
Gosh, the aftermath of this stuff, it's just so emotional, the domino effect of what really happens to your life after everything has been lost over and over again. It's unbelievable. Sam, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to talk to you again at the top of the next hour. I'm going to go to Guad here, standing by for us in Fort Myers. I want to talk about some of those tornadoes, Guad, if we can, for a moment. Multiple people dead now from those tornado outbreaks. And you have folks now saying that they're not getting the help that they need.
Yasmin, right. So a lot of the people that were in these areas hit by the tornadoes, I mean, this happened hours before the hurricane made landfall. This part of Fort Myers is about 25 miles south of where Sam is located. Now, the rain and the wind from the hurricane didn't cause much damage here. This happened before, again, the hurricane made landfall. The residents here telling me there were tornado reports when the destruction happened. Now, we know that the help is out there, right? The governor has been offering press conferences asking residents to contact the state. So they are being clear that the state is managing a lot of the resources. They're asking people to Google Hope Florida to get some of that help. And they also have a phone number that people can call. It's a 1-833-GET-HOPE. And that's where a lot of these resources will be managed. So people can call and figure out what kind of help they can receive. Now, in these areas like this neighborhood where they had a lot of destruction from what has been reported, might have been a tornado, we have a lot of debris. We have down power lines. That's been one of the issues for a lot of the residents here. You can see these power lines. There's a cable that's just hanging there. Those power lines are the most dangerous. And if you look further down, some of those go down onto the ground, and there's also right on the street. That's one of the things that authorities are warning residents. They're asking them to wait until the power company can get in here and make repairs and try to stay away from that because there is a lot of danger coming from those areas.
So I'm wondering, as we're kind of looking ahead to cleanup, right? From my understanding, officials there aren't going to begin cleanup until Monday. Is that because they want to make sure the area is safe before they do?
Well, Yasmin, what they want is people to have time to gather all of the trash, all of the stuff inside their homes that was damaged and bring it out to the curb. You can see some vegetation here. You can see some furniture. Across the street, this house had half of the roof ripped off. You can see some workers up there. I was just speaking to the crew. They know the owner of the home, and they're assessing some of that damage. Part of the roof from the house where it was actually blown over to the other side. You can see it down there. But what they're working on right now is on picking up all of the debris that they can and bringing it out here to bring it out by the curve. So this is what authorities want people to do. They want them to push all of the debris, whether it's furniture. This looks like it was a part of the inside of the house that was destroyed, vegetation, and anything they can so that the trash pickup can begin. So they want to give them the time to do this before they start picking up the trash on Monday. Yasmin?
Yeah, certainly a prolonged process, to say the least. Guad Venegas, thank you as well. We're going to have a lot more coverage, folks, on the aftermath of the hurricane later on in the show with our very own Marissa Parra as well. But want to move to another story that we've been following. A ton of unanswered questions here tonight about what happened at a tourist mine in Colorado that killed one person. We first told you the story last night. Two groups of tourists were visiting the Molly Kathleen gold mine in Cripple Creek when the elevator actually stopped working. One group was stranded 1,000 feet underground for 7 hours. The other group trapped in the elevator shaft as well. One person in that group died. The other 11, including, by the way, 2 kids, were rescued. 4 of them hurt. Want to bring in Liz Croy to talk more about this. What are we learning here, Liz, about what happened and how the one person lost their life?
Yeah, there's still a lot of questions, but we have just gotten some semblance of answers at a press conference that just happened with the sheriff, and they have identified the victim, Yasmin. We have learned that the person that died is a 46-year-old man named Patrick Weir, who is a local from this historic mining community. He was an employee here at the mine, and he was the tour guide on this group, taking 10 people in the elevator with him down into the mine when there was some kind of malfunction. The sheriff says there's indications that there was a malfunction with the door. They wouldn't go into further detail as to exactly what happened and exactly what then led to his death. But obviously a very traumatic situation, not only for the people that were on that elevator and then had to be rescued and had to experience that, but also for this community. It's a very tight-knit community here, and this is a very historic gold mine. So that's the latest that we're learning there. We know that the folks who were trapped 1,000 feet underground, they were safely brought up. They were not told, Yasmin, while they were down there for nearly 7 hours, officials made the decision not to tell them that somebody had died from an elevator, not just to try to keep the calm. And so then they only learned when they came back up.
So what happens? Because I know this is obviously a tourist attraction, right? Is it going to stay open? Is it going to stay closed for a certain amount of time? What's happening?
So, of all things, this Sunday was going to be the last day it would be open for the season. So, because this happened and also because of that, it is now closed.
Okay.
OSHA is involved, helping with this investigation. But all the officials here say that the hope is that it will reopen. This is a huge part of this community and a vital part of both the historic aspect of this community, but also the economic aspect of this community in terms of driving tourism to this town. Yasmin.
All right, Liz Kurtzfors. Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. In the last couple of minutes, everybody, former President Trump wrapping up a speech in one city that he has targeted with lies about immigrants. We're talking about Aurora, Colorado, a city a lot different than Springfield, Ohio. It's got a couple of 100,000 people. It's diverse. But if you hear Mr. Trump tell it, it's overrun by a Venezuelan gang camped out in the apartment complex you see here. And he's saying today that he wants to use a 226-year-old law to deport people who he says commit, in his words, by the way, rampant migrant crime. Take a listen.
I will rescue Aurora and every town that has been invaded and conquered. We will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail or kick them out of our country, and we will be very, very effective in doing it.
All right, let's be totally clear here. There is no evidence that undocumented immigrants are driving a crime surge in cities, both Aurora and nationwide as well, by the way. Vaughn Hilliard is standing by for us in Palm Springs, California, near where the former president is actually going to be this weekend. Vaughn, as always, my friend, it's good to talk to you. We've actually pulled some of the numbers for you about these so-called kind of migrant crime sprees, right? Because we've done the analysis. We've been to Aurora. And what he's claiming is not what we're seeing.
No, and politically he is trying to use crime and tying it to the rise of migrants coming into the United States over the last 4 years for political purposes. And that's why he was in Aurora, Colorado, not the Colorado which has gone for Democratic presidential candidates several cycles in a row. Not that he intends to or actually believes he's going to win it, but he is using this as a broader message in going into some of these areas like Aurora, where he makes the case that migrant criminal gangs have overtaken some apartment complexes, which is just not accurate or the truth. But when you look at some of these statistics, number one, that migrants are been found to 60% less likely to be incarcerated in the United States compared to U.S.-born citizens. And when you look at some of these, particularly, we should note Democratic cities, but cities that also have a higher migrant population, you see a downward trajectory of crime in 2024, according to crime statistics that NBC News has pulled from Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, serious crime going down among these cities with higher immigrant populations. So for Donald Trump, that is not stopping him from using this and using particular anecdotal situations, which are, let's be very clear, there are situations of murder and rape that are committed by undocumented immigrants in the United States. But Donald Trump is using those few anecdotes to paint a larger depiction of a population that is upwards of 15 to 20 million individuals in the United States. That is not a fair or accurate representation of the whole undocumented immigrant population as a whole, yes.
Right. Take a look at some of that data that we had up on the screen as you were talking there, Vaughn. A lot of these major cities obviously crime down in the double digits. D.C. 17% down, Chicago 16%, Denver 11% there. Want to shift gears while I have you, Vaughn. I want to talk about kind of the security concerns, the ongoing security concerns for the former president, along with those multiple attempted assassinations on the former president's life, and why it is he's no longer taking part in his favorite pastime until the election.
Right. Donald Trump plays an awful lot of golf. He does it even before going to campaign rallies. Of course, that second assassination attempt was on his golf club in West Palm Beach. And we have now learned that he is no longer playing golf at the urging of Secret Service and other federal law enforcement officials who have told him that while he is running for president, that they do not feel like they have the security apparatus that could ensure his security on the golf course. Of course, the public has seen camera shots of Donald Trump playing golf, not just in West Palm, but at his golf courses from Bedminster, New Jersey, out west to the greater Los Angeles area. And there's a sense of, across 18 holes, that they're not able to secure these grounds. And so Donald Trump, we have been told, is not going to be playing golf through Election Day. Of course, this is all heightened at a time in which the federal authorities, the Department of Justice, have also indicated that they have intelligence that suggests that Iran have assassination plots on the former president's life as well. So these are serious circumstances that the Republican nominee is facing, and have clearly led to him not being able to go and participate in the game that he enjoys playing when not on the campaign trail. Yasmin.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you. Appreciate it. Vice President Kamala Harris headed back to Washington, but she's also eyeing the Southwest. In the last couple of hours, she's emphasizing a, quote, country over party message to voters in Scottsdale.
Do we stand together as Americans, being our first identity, and come together around these issues?
So this is kind of part of this all-out blitz, right? Not just by the VP and her running mate, Tim Walz, but look at this map. You've got former President Obama making a couple of trips out west, former President Clinton headed down south, First Lady Joe Biden pretty much in any swing state that you can name. We've got David Noriega live for us in Phoenix. The vice president tackled a lot of issues, a lot of topics in Arizona. Immigration, though, was largely in the back seat. Why is that?
Yeah, at the rally last night, Yasmin, not only in the backseat, just completely absent. There was not even a passing reference to immigration or the border in Arizona, which is really remarkable when you know the political, recent historical context of this state. This is a state that relatively recently went from red to purple, and the movement that is credited with that change is the immigrant rights movement and Latino voters in response to the anti-immigrant politics of the 2010s with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the Show Me Your Papers law, et cetera. So it's remarkable that the that the vice president in Arizona would not even mention immigration before an audience with a substantial number of Latino voters. When I was at the rally, I talked to a number of people in attendance, and one of the things that I was curious about was whether anybody minded that in this appeal, the sort of turn to the center or the right, to appeal to swing voters, whether anybody minded that she was sort of leaving behind some previous progressive policy positions that she held on, for example, immigration, but also on issues like healthcare, on Medicare for all. And by and large, the answer that I got, remember, these are Harris voters, not swing voters, but still the answer that I got was no. Take a listen to what some of the folks that I interviewed had to say.
She's working towards resonating to all voters, and so she's focusing on those issues that represent voters in Arizona.
We need this for unity. We need this as a state. We need this for our people. I don't see any other person who can get us out of this mess other than Kamala.
So that message, that unity message of trying to appeal to all Americans, that is clearly resonating with her base, with people who were probably already planning on voting for her. What we don't know is whether it's resonating with those elusive swing voters. Yasmin?
Okay, so talking about this appeal kind of to all voters, I also want to talk about this appeal that Tim Walz is making to male voters. You got the VP running mate. He's campaigning hard across the Midwest today. In the last couple of hours in Michigan, for instance, he's accusing the former president of making empty promises. I want to take a listen to what he had to say, and then we'll talk.
Cities growing, crime's down, factories are opening up. But those guys, all they know about manufacturing is manufacturing every time they show up. Every time they show up.
You got some women in the background there. You got a lot of men in the background as well. Tim Walz also heading now to a football game in his hometown in Minnesota. Again, this kind of push for male voters here. How's it going?
Yeah, Yasmin, so Harris and the Democrats have lost ground with a number of key demographics: Latino voters, black voters, non-college educated voters. And in each of those demographics, that losing of ground is particularly dramatic when you look at men, and especially young men. So the campaign is very clearly targeting these demographics. Barack Obama this week was appealing directly to black men, particularly young black men. You have Tim Walz sort of tapping his football coach past to appeal to this specific demographic. I don't think we'll know exactly how it goes until November. And Yasmin, one thing that they have going in their favor is that much of this demographic tends to be low propensity. So if anything, they can hope that if they're planning to vote for Donald Trump, that they just won't turn out at all. Yasmin?
David Noriega, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, tonight officials want to know exactly what caused a chemical leak at a Texas oil plant that killed 2 people and sent dozens more to the hospital. The release of the toxic hydrogen sulfide gas shut down both sides of a major highway, put the entire city of Deer Park into a shelter-in-place mode. People were told to keep their windows and their doors closed and turn off their air conditioning. Investigators apparently had to wait it out for hours until it was safe to enter the area. Luckily, it seems, the situation is contained, with city officials lifting the shelter in place after air monitoring showed no risk to the area. I want to bring in Kathy Park, who's got more on this story. Where do things stand now in terms, Kathy, of this investigation and the safety of the community? How sure are they that things are okay?
Yeah, so Yasmin, as of 9:30 last night, the shelter-in-place order was lifted after air monitoring reports found no hazardous pollutants in the area. The Pemex facility where this all took place released a statement saying that the incident was contained to their site and has been isolated. They're not detecting any off-site impacts right now. They also said that residents could actually see flaring continue as they try to contain the situation. But as far as the cause of the leak, it's still very much under investigation. But it's also worth noting, Yasmin, that during what was a pretty volatile situation last night, the city of Deer Park experienced some technical difficulties with their emergency alert system, leaving many residents really in the dark about breaking news happening in their backyard. The city said some residents may have even received notices with incorrect spelling and grammar, and may have even gotten some duplicate notifications as well. So the emergency response citywide is also under review.
Yeah, not a good time for the emergency response to go haywire. I want to talk about the 35 people or so that were hurt. What do we know about them?
So, Yasmin, this was a deadly incident as well. 2 people were killed, and we're told by the company 35 workers were affected as well. Pemex, they did release a statement earlier this afternoon saying that 13 workers are currently hospitalized, but they are in stable condition. But, Yasmin, it's worth noting that hydrogen sulfide, it is a highly toxic and flammable gas. It's typically used for gas and oil refining, for paper processing. So if someone is surrounded by this gas, enclosed in a tight space, it can be extremely dangerous, as we saw overnight.
All right, Kathy Park. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. Coming up, everybody, Elon Musk unveiling his new driverless cyber cab. There's no steering wheel. There's no pedals. Are you going to be driving that thing? And parts of the country could get a dazzling light show tonight, where you'll need to be to catch a glimpse of the Northern Lights. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. A world-famous music exec's got major beef with the Swifties. Why he's telling them it's time to, in his words, by the way, move on. Up first, though, tonight, Tesla's value tumbling down over $60 billion. At one point, shares dropping as much as 10% today. As questions are growing about the safety and the reliability of Tesla's long-awaited cyber cab. Take a look at that. Elon Musk unveiling the new electric robotaxi dedicated to self-driving at a splashy event at a Hollywood studio last night. The robotaxi has no steering wheel, no pedals, but Musk says these self-driving cars are expected to be 10 to 20 times safer than human-driven cars. Something to think about, as we're already losing about 3,000 people in the United States every year in car accidents because of distracted driving. But fans who think this all sounds pretty good, they're going to have to wait until 2026 before getting in one of these robotaxis. I want to bring in Brian Chung to talk more about this. So many questions, and not sure if I'm going to get in one even in 2026, but that's besides the point. Talk about how big of a milestone first this is, because, by the way, there's been a lot of years of promises and a lot of blown deadlines here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the Cybertruck, right? They had promised that in 2021. It wasn't until late 2023 that came out. And that's why this isn't necessarily a milestone so much as it is an aspirational goal, because as you mentioned, these robotaxis might not hit the road in production until 2026. But let me just kind of step back and explain what Elon Musk's grand vision is for the robotaxi. It doesn't have a wheel. It doesn't have pedals. And that's because the idea is that in the future, you might not need to own your own individual car to get around. If you need to get from point A to point B, you would hail one of these robotaxis, you would jump right in, it would take you to where you need to be. People wouldn't need to have cars parked in their driveways anymore. So that's the grand vision. He hopes to sell these at $30,000 a pop. But as you mentioned, Yasmin, this is a pretty ambitious goal of trying to get this out there by 2026.
So I want to talk about where this is all headed, right? Because we just did this story earlier this week about women feeling kind of safer in a robocab instead of with a male driver. We seem to be in kind of this new area, right? This new frontier, and we're not going back. So talk through kind of the pros and cons here of driverless cabs like this one.
Yeah, and by the way, we're already in the era of driverless cabs, right? Waymo, which is a Google product, already has cars driving around here in Los Angeles, for example, without any operator behind the wheel. But look, the grand vision here is, the opportunity to reinvent our cities, because if you don't need to own your own individual car because you could get around with these robotaxis, there's the benefit of reducing traffic, which is a major deal here where I stand in Los Angeles. You wouldn't need parking anymore. You would also save on ownership costs because you wouldn't need to buy the car itself or pay for the insurance on a monthly basis to have that car protected from any sort of accidents. And then lastly, there's increasing productivity. If you don't have to sit in hours of traffic, you could likely get more work done. Now, on the con side, there have been some accidents with this type of self-driving technology. In fact, just with Tesla, there's the autopilot function that exists on some of these vehicles. The NHTSA has identified 467 collisions and at least 14 deaths that could be due to a critical safety gap in the full self-driving modes in these Tesla vehicles. So that's something that's going to have to be a part of the development process with this robotaxis as well, making sure that riders are safe, Yasmin.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the claims that Musk is making here, right? Because these are the things that really had me scratching my head. Saying that you could feasibly fall asleep and wake up at your destination, and that Tesla should be thought as an AI robotics company, not a car maker. What are we hearing about these comments?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, when you look at the stock, at least today, investors don't see it as an AI company. They say it as a car company. And there are some analysts that said, we would really like to see a cheaper new Tesla unveil, what they call the Model 2, instead of all this self-driving technology and the robotaxis and the robots. They were dancing robots, Yasmin, that they unveiled yesterday, in addition to a robo-cab, kind of like a big van, if you will, that can hold 20 people. Again, some investors saying, why don't we just get more Tesla vehicles out there? That's the reason why the stock was down over 8% today.
So, but the robots aren't driving the driverless cars. The robots are just dancing.
No, I mean, presumably you could put the robot in the car if you wanted.
Just like as a mate, as a friend.
As a friend, exactly.
Okay, got it. I just trying to keep it clear here. Okay, Brian Chung, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, want to get you over to the 5 things our team thinks that you should know about tonight. Number 1, a new military investigation finds the death of those 2 U.S. Navy SEALs who drowned trying to climb onto a ship with illicit weapons back in January could have been prevented. The investigation reveals there were major training failures and conflicting guidance on when and how to use the emergency flotation devices that could have kept them alive. Naval Special Warfare Command says changes to training practices are in fact being made. Number 2, whooping cough now spreading across the country at the highest levels in a decade, with more than 16,000 cases just this year. That is more than 4 times as many as this time last year. Experts saying it could be caused by people getting behind on their vaccines and doctors testing for whooping cough more. At number 3, music executive Scooter Braun now says he wishes people would, quote, move on from his feud with Taylor Swift. That was at an LA event. Remember, Braun, bought Swift's old record label with rights to her masters and then sold them, she says, without her permission. Swift then re-recorded the music and then released the album as Taylor's version. The only thing capturing a lot of cultural attention, the feud even chronicled in an HBO documentary. Number 4, officials saying some parts of the Midwest and Northeast may get to see the northern lights again tonight. The lights dazzling skies as yet another series of unusually strong solar storms hits Earth. People as far south as Florida got to see the stunning, colorful skies last night. So if you missed it last night, you can catch it maybe tonight. Number 5, Ukraine's president now asking the Pope for help in securing the release of Ukrainians held captive by Russia. Volodymyr Zelensky met with Pope Francis at the Vatican today as part of his tour to discuss a victory plan for the war with Russia. All right, later on in the show, Russia's Vladimir Putin getting real cozy with Iran's new leader. Why that is so concerning for U.S. officials. And it's a bird, it's a plane, it's 60 women skydiving. How the group of ladies set a new world record. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I want to take you back now to our top story of the night. The aftermath of Hurricane Milton, having been hit first by Hallie a few weeks ago and now Milton. A lot of longtime locals, they want out. It is part of this broader undoing of Florida's Great Migration. The state saw its population boom in the last couple of years as people moved south for Florida's sun and sand. More than 700,000 people moved to the state back in 2022, and it was the second fastest growing state of last year. But now you've got these growing concerns over stronger and stronger hurricanes, the rising cost of insurance and repairs that come after. It has people kind of rethinking those decisions. I want to bring in Marissa Parra, who's standing by for us in St. Petersburg, Florida. Marissa, thanks for talking to us about this. I mean, I said it, right? You've got these hurricanes back to back. They're stronger every single time. This one really catastrophic, right? You've got these sky-high insurance prices, in some places going up 400%, as is being reported. What are folks telling you about kind of the state of play there and their future in Florida?
Yasmin, it's an important question and one that we're going to be analyzing far beyond this next week because it's been something that we've been reporting on the ground here in Florida for a long time. I did stories on Florida's insurance crisis last year, on homeowners feeling uncertain about their future here. And then here we are with back-to-back hurricanes. Certainly did nothing to improve the situation. We know that last year we were talking about insurance companies like Allstate, like Farmers, scaling back their coverage in certain high-risk states like this one. And there's a lot of people who rely on Citizens Insurance. This is the quote-unquote state-backed insurance of last resort. They call themselves the insurance of last resort. And even their prices had continued to go up. We just spoke to a woman who told us exactly that. So, Yasmin, in terms of how people are speaking about this today, it really depends on their own situation because there's still a lot of people just fighting to survive, Yasmin, who aren't even thinking that far in advance. They're just trying to think, when am I going to get my electricity back? Where am I sleeping tonight? How am I getting water? There's a lot of that. There's people still getting rescued as we speak today. Those rivers crusting not that far away from where we are right now. Homeowners in this neighborhood where we are, this is Shore Acres in St. Petersburg, hit hard by Hallie, hit once again hard by Milton, talking about this is now maybe the 4th time they have had to gut their entire homes and really starting to feel like maybe even though they dreamed of living here, Yasmin, they don't know if they're going to be able to last because they don't want another round of this.
So you talk about for the 4th time having to gut their entire homes, right? Every time you file a claim, your premiums go up. And that also has kind of a domino effect on these insurance companies, some having to buckle under the pressure, these smaller insurance companies, others bailing on Florida altogether. Talk us through some of the costs that we are seeing there.
Exactly. Well, we know that some of those companies, we've done some reporting on those companies, have to scale back. And by the way, one thing I wanted to point out that I realized I forgot to is that this is coming after what we saw was a pandemic population boom within the state of Florida. We saw a lot of people flocking here. And so now I'm curious what's going to happen with the population. Just years after we saw that boom, a lot of people starting to feel like maybe they can't stay. And part of that is because of the rising insurance costs. Some of these smaller insurance companies have already decided that they cannot continue to do what they set out to do here and scaling back on their coverage. Citizen just started rising. They requested to increase their premiums in double digits, Yasmin. So I think, again, right now we're talking about the recovery of the debris, the cleanup, getting people those basic necessities. But this conversation you and I are having is one we're going to continue to have in the coming months, if not years, Yasmin.
Well, you think about doubling premiums. It makes me think back to some sound that was played by Sam Brock at the top of the show, where a guy has his entire life savings in his home, and if his home is gone, he has nothing. And then what does he do? And then he's got these mounting costs coming from everywhere. Marissa Parra for us. Thank you. Appreciate it. So NBC covers hundreds of stories every day. And because it's tough to read, to watch, or listen to all of them, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment that we call The Local. We're going to start in our Western Bureau. A group of over 60 women setting a skydiving world record in Southern California. The women from 22 different countries jumped from 4 different planes at around 16,000 feet high and only had about 60 seconds to make a formation in the sky in the shape of a snowflake, if you can see it there. Oh, there it is. Wow, that's incredible. From our Northeast Bureau, a water main break flooding a major street in Boston for the second time in just 2 weeks. The latest flood caused a sinkhole in the street, swallowing up an SUV. Boston water officials still don't know what caused the break, but the city says they're going to keep water shut off there while they do the repairs. Also out of our Northeast Bureau, a family is suing a funeral home in New York after a TikTok video showed their mother's casket sent to the wrong country. The family asked to send the woman's body to Ecuador for burial, but a video shows a different family receiving her casket in Guatemala at a burial meant for a 38-year-old man. Apparently, both bodies were prepared at the same funeral home. The family says they eventually moved their mother back to Ecuador. NBC News has not received a comment from the Rivera funeral home. Russian President Vladimir Putin today in a landmark first meeting with Iran's new president, saying the two share a, quote, very close worldview and understanding that is causing concern here in the United States. It is a huge meeting for these two leaders who are both fighting these sort of proxy wars with the United States. They met on the sidelines of a larger conference of leaders from the region celebrating growing economic ties between Russia and Iran and similar views on world affairs. It's coming at a time when Tehran is supplying weapons for Moscow's war in Ukraine, with the Middle East bracing at any moment now for Israel's response to Tehran's largest ever missile attack last week. Danielle Hamamdjan is joining us now with more on this. Walk us through, Danielle, if you will, what else we know about this meeting between Putin and the Iranian President Pezeshkian, and how much of a concern is this globally?
Well, these are two international pariahs. They've been isolated by the international community. They've both been sanctioned by the West. And so they look to each other for assistance, and they look to each other to do business. And according to Iranian state television, the newly elected president, Mr. Pezeshkian, was quoted as saying today that they are much closer to each other, these two countries, than any other nations. Why is it a concern? Well, look at their foreign policies. For Iran, it boils down to two things. One, the destruction of Israel, and two, the reduction, or to completely eliminate, if you will, the American influence in the Middle East. For Russia's Vladimir Putin, well, he just wants an entirely new world order, one that doesn't include the West, one that doesn't include the United States. And so the U.S. has accused Iran of shipping short-range ballistic missiles to Russia for its war in Ukraine, something Tehran denies. And for its part, Iran has also, according to analysts, looking to Russia to upgrade, to replace its aging fleet of fighter jets. I mean, as one military analyst put it to me, its most modern fighter jet is from the 1980s. Iran's Air Force is practically obsolete.
Yeah. So with that all in mind, as we kind of talk about the rising tensions in the Middle East, you have the ongoing, essentially, violence in Lebanon that has been continuously escalating. You have Iran kind of on edge, waiting for retaliation from Israel. What do we know about the state of play there? If we know how Israel is going to retaliate, when they're going to retaliate, or if they plan on doing it inside Lebanese borders?
Right. And so, well, according to two diplomats from the region, it appears that Iran has been telling Arab nations in the Gulf, do not open your airspace to any retaliatory strike from Israel, or else. That or else means that they will be considered as being part of this war. They will be considered participants, and therefore targeting them would be fair game. Now, according to U.S. officials telling NBC tonight that the United States does not believe Israel will be conducting an assassination in Israel. It does not believe that Israel will be targeting nuclear sites. If it did, by the way, it would need the assistance of the United States. And so officials also are telling NBC that U.S. is poised to defend its assets in the region, 40,000 troops, multiple bases in the region. And the U.S. does not believe, will not be rather, providing any direct military support to this operation. So it's not a question of if this is going to happen. It's very much a question of when and how hard is Israel going to hit back.
All right, Danielle Hamamdjian. Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate it. The 2024 Nobel Peace Prize awarded today to a Japanese anti-nuclear weapon group formed by atomic bombing survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Nobel Committee says the group's work significantly contributed to the establishment of what's called the nuclear taboo, where no nuclear bomb has been used for close to 80 years. The group has been campaigning against nuclear weapons for decades, using their personal stories to educate people around the world about living with the physical effects of radiation exposure and the psychological impacts of surviving a nuclear bomb. I want to bring in Janice Mackey-Frere for us, who's got more on this. Janice, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Tell us more about this group, their mission, and their reaction to this award.
Yes, and Nihon Hidankyo was formed in 1956, and they have spent literally decades sharing their experiences of the hardship that has come with being living memorials of these atomic blasts in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What they saw was unthinkable. The bombs killing an estimated 200,000 people. The survivors today were children then or not yet born, and they emerged from ruined cities and devastated families to the long-term physical effects of radiation exposure, as well as social stigma and survivor's guilt. In their founding statement, they allude to have been silent and hiding, and now sharing their stories of pain and loss of what nuclear war can bring. And for years, they felt shunned in Japan, where they're known as hibakusha, people affected by bombs. So today, for many, this recognition was overdue. They've been nominated twice before. Toshiyuki Mamaki is the group's co-chair, and he's a survivor, and he broke down when the award was announced. He said, it can't be real. Yes.
Incredible moment for them, and a real full circle moment for them, and the important work that they do every day. Janice Mackey-Frere for us. Thank you. Appreciate it. Still ahead, everybody, former President Trump's got a less than flattering biopic hitting theaters tonight. Why his campaign sued to keep you from seeing it. All right, welcome back. Perhaps the most controversial movie of this award season hits theaters tonight, and it's on a topic that we've already talked about in this show.
Hello, this is Donald Trump from Mr. Cohn. Thank you so much.
Donald who?
That is a clip from The Apprentice. It's a film that made waves at the Cannes Film Festival, all about the former president's early days with his late fixer, Roy Cohn. Now the former president's campaign is hoping you're not going to see it, calling it pure malicious defamation and garbage. They even sued to try and stop it, to no avail, by the way. And the actor playing Cohn, Jeremy Strong, says it is essential viewing before Election Day.
The movie's not trying to tell you who to vote for. It's trying to inform people about what made Donald Trump, what shaped Donald Trump, how he became the person he is today, how we got to where we got to today.
Steve Patterson in Reno, Nevada for us. Joining us now with more on this. We've heard a lot about Roy Cohn over the last couple of years, especially since Donald Trump took to the political stage. We've learned a lot about him as well, and especially a lot about the former president's history in New York City as a real estate magnate, per se. This is not a flattering portrayal of the former president.
Yeah, I've been told that certain members at NBC News have been given a screener. I have not seen it, so I'm only going based on the reporting from people that have seen that screener. But what I've heard, I would say brutal is a good adjective for it. This is the portrayal of a man who obviously they want to show somebody that is sympathetic and sort of an origin story, but also someone that is involved in a lot. Apparently in this movie, there are scenes of sex parties, of Trump abusing weight loss medication, which he's denied, Trump getting liposuction and scalp enhancement surgery, which he's denied. The worst thing that I've heard, though, is that there actually is a scene in this movie where Trump sexually assaults his ex-wife, Ivana Trump, which is obviously taken from a deposition of their 1990 divorce. So there's some basis of truth in it, although Ivana has later denied it, and Trump later, of course, refutes it as well. So what's true and what's not, what's salacious and what is more factual, I don't think we'll have a clear picture on. The point is, obviously, anybody inside Trump's camp would not want you to see this, based on what I'm reading.
Yeah, and by the way, all that you just laid out there is one of the reasons why this thing almost didn't get made.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem about this. None of the major Hollywood studios picked this up. It ran through a very small distributor. And part of the reason for that is because we all know how litigious Donald Trump and his camp are. In fact, they've already sent cease and desist letters to the movie's director and producer. We have a statement from the Trump campaign, or a spokesperson from the Trump camp. He said, quote, "The film is pure malicious defamation, should have never seen the light of day, and doesn't even deserve a place in the straight-to-DVD section at a bargain bin at a soon-to-be-closed discount movie store. Ouch. It belongs in a dumpster fire." The director has tried to clarify his position, saying, look, this is not a hit job. He was trying to do a realistic portrait of a person that would be involved in something like this in New York that became the man that we all know. That's Ali Abbasi. He said this, quote, "You might find some of these character questions you have about Trump answered. The bigger point we're trying to make in the movie is the political theater has been going on for a long time in this country." The movie's out in like maybe 1,700 select theaters or so. Pretty limited release. So I don't think this is going to be the October surprise that many may have hoped for. But I do think it's going to make waves based on obviously what I've been reading.
It'll be interesting to see how many folks actually get out to see it, especially between now and the November elections. Steve Patterson, thank you. Appreciate it. Still to come, everybody. Could seaweed save the planet? How it could fix cow burps. Yeah, you heard me right. Cow burps that affect the climate. We'll be right back. Welcome back to tonight's Original Now with in-depth reporting on a topic that we've been watching, climate change, making a real impact on all of our lives. You've seen the devastation throughout tonight's show. Some scientists now say they found a way to help make it better, and it involves seaweed and cow burps. NBC's Christine Romans has the story.
There's no question, beef is big.
Beef, it's what's for dinner.
The world produces an estimated 160 billion pounds of it each year. But research shows the world's 1.5 billion cattle have an outsized impact on the climate. They use up a ton of water, and their manure can pollute waterways. But one impact is easier to hear than see. That's a cow burping out methane, a greenhouse gas that builds up in a cow's 4 stomachs as it digests food. Globally, cattle emit more than 231 billion pounds of methane into the atmosphere every year, tagging them as the biggest agricultural source of greenhouse gases worldwide. One solution to this turf problem could come from the surf.
This seaweed is somewhat of the holy grail of, climate change in terms of solutions from the ocean.
Dr. Jen Smith is researching how this species of seaweed, called Asparagopsis taxiformis, can stop all that burping.
Once it is fed to the livestock, it simply prevents methane from ever being formed, and therefore the cows don't burp that methane out of their mouth.
One study found that adding just a tiny amount of this red seaweed to a cow's diet reduced its methane emissions between 40 and 98%. Now Dr. Smith is partnering with an Australian company to scale up production.
The goal is not how we produce it. We know how to do that, but how we do it more efficiently.
Steve Meller's company CH4 Global makes a red seaweed-based feed additive called Methane Tamer. It's already being fed to cattle in Australia with plans to grow it worldwide. The goal is to perfect the process of growing Asparagopsis in outdoor grow ponds that can be built anywhere with access to ocean water.
We're giving people the choice to say, do I eat that plant-based approach or do I eat that meat-based approach that has now dramatically lowered its carbon footprint?
Meller expects to see low methane beef in U.S. supermarkets by the beginning of next year. But he has some big hurdles to clear, like getting the FDA and Congress to agree on how to regulate the seaweed additive, something CH4 is working with lawmakers to change. And the whole idea has some experts skeptical.
I don't want to say it would do nothing, but just wouldn't do enough.
Jan Dukevich points to recent studies that show less exciting results from red seaweed and says that the only way to significantly reduce methane emissions is to grow and eat fewer cows.
I think if we're talking about making large-scale changes in the food system, we really need to think about the what and not the how of what we're producing.
Still, to Steve Meller, it's full steam ahead.
Little seaweed with a big footprint.
The little engine could, so to speak. And it's red, too.
Red seaweed for a greener future. Christine Romans, NBC News.
Red seaweed, no burps. Christine, thank you so much. That wraps it up for this hour. More coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air with the race to rescue hurricane survivors in full force. Florida's governor saying any death from Milton now is preventable. With millions still in the dark and debris everywhere, new frustrations, by the way, from people hit hard by tornadoes who say they're not getting the help that they need. We're live across the area. We're also live outside a mine in Colorado after a deadly elevator malfunction stranded tourists for hours underground. The big unanswered questions we have tonight. Then former President Trump's visiting a city that he's attacked relentlessly as an example of what he calls migrant crime. We're going to give you the facts of the situation on the ground and on a 226-year law he says he wants to use. Plus, why Vice President Harris is calling on the closers on the campaign trail. Her newest plans to dispatch two former presidents and the First Lady to spread her message. And new questions tonight for Tesla over its new self-driving cab. Would you get behind the wheel of a car that has no steering wheel? We're going to show it to you later on in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin in for Hallie tonight. And as we're coming on the air, it is a race to rescue and rebuild in Florida as officials are warning people not to let their guard down in the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis telling people that they're now in a period where deaths are, in fact, preventable if people are aware of the biggest dangers that officials are working to address. You got down power lines, flooded communities as well. You got more than 2 million people that are in the dark tonight, and we're just learning in the last hour or so the number of people killed by this storm has gone up to 17. As those who have survived, they start to pick up the pieces, what is left of their homes, especially in those coastal communities like Hillsborough County, where officials say they haven't seen the worst of it yet. This is what the streets there look like today. Officials saying they're worried because this river, it still hasn't crested, meaning it still hasn't reached its highest level yet. And there's also the issue of floodwaters contaminated, by the way, by sewage. Tonight, things are starting to open back up, though. You got Tampa International Airport. That was the first flight out early this morning. And access to the barrier islands, which took a direct hit from Milton, now open too. You're taking a look at all the traffic from evacuees driving back to their homes now to see what is left. On Sunday, the president is going to head to Florida to visit affected areas. That is where we're going to get some breaking news that a House committee is going to be investigating FEMA's hurricane response, making it the second congressional inquiry into federal hurricane response. We've got Guad Venegas out in Fort Myers, Sam Brock for us in Punta Gorda. Sam, you're going to start things off for us. Governor DeSantis said a lot of these areas had more debris, actually, than from Helene, I should say, than Milton. Give us kind of an inside look here at what that means for the hard-hit barrier islands.
Oh, without a doubt, that totally tracks. First of all, Yasmin, based on what we've seen in the conversations that we've had, I'm in Punta Gorda tonight, where you see over my shoulder, you have boats that have capsized, portions of this marina that were turned upside down from the storm surge here. The mayor saying, it was a pretty extraordinary circumstance. As far as the debris aspect is concerned, hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of debris were cleared before Milton ever arrived. But Hallie was the real culprit, at least based on what people are telling me on the ground level. We're in Inglewood. It's about 30 or 40 minutes west of where we are, basically right on the coast before you start to get out to the barrier islands. And I'm just going down these streets, and you're seeing just still huge piles of everything from people's personal toiletries to furniture to refrigerators to doors. I mean, you're talking to people and they're saying they're seeing all these items and they don't even know who it belongs to. Not only them, they couldn't identify a neighbor or where it even came from. That was all there, it seems to be, or much of it, before Milton even arrived, despite these frantic efforts to try to remove all of that debris. Had a conversation as well with Charlotte Sow. She is an owner of Landy's Restaurant. It's right there near Minnesota Key, which was decimated. Right over her shoulder, there are all of these homes, I would say a cluster of probably 50 or 60 of them that all suffered some degree of damage, and the debris that you just mentioned. And she talked about the process of still trying to reopen again after getting hit by another hurricane. Take a listen. Is that not even your refrigerator in the water over your shoulder?
No, to be honest with you, most of this is not ours. We just keep going. We've been through 3 of these and a pandemic. We just keep coming back.
Yeah, to clarify, there's actually been 5 hurricanes since Ian 2 years ago, Yasmin. Wow. 3 of them struck her restaurant. So it's extraordinary to think about the depth of what these people have been through just in the last couple of years.
So I mentioned, Sam, that the governor is saying that most of the deaths, or all the deaths now after the hurricane has passed, are in fact preventable. I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons why you still have a curfew in place where you are to keep folks safe.
It's safety and it's looting. A lot of these neighborhoods, I can't tell you how many people have told me that they've had real issues with folks coming and not just sort of looky-looing around, but taking their stuff out of their lawns, which is really hard to wrap your mind around given what they're going through right now. But yeah, as far as the curfews and the safety components are concerned, they are not allowing officials in Charlotte County, people to get onto Minnesota Key that we just mentioned a second ago, because they're still trying to restore electricity, and they're getting transformers that are blowing in the process. Heavy machinery all over these islands. I mean, that's true probably not just there, but in many locations as well. A lot of these law enforcement officials are trying to protect people from themselves, even as it's frustrating for them. And of course, you're looking at the water rescues right now as well. There are hundreds of these going on around Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, Pasco County. A lot of the rivers involved are not cresting until later tonight, and then not going below major flood stage, Yasmin, until Monday.
Wow.
So just so many sort of moving parts at the moment that communities are dealing with.
Which, by the way, just delays the cleanup effort, delays the effort for folks to get back to their homes, assess the damages, and figure out what next steps forward are. While I have you, Sam, I just got to ask you kind of about some of these false claims that are being made out there, especially about the government controlling these hurricanes that hit Florida in the last couple of weeks. Governor DeSantis actually addressed that, saying that those theories are not based on anything factual and are the same, comparing them essentially to saying global warming increases the intensity of hurricanes, which, by the way, is something that we do know is true based on a lot of research from a lot of scientists. How are folks there receiving these claims?
In a nutshell, I'm happy to say I have not had a single conversation with anyone who thinks that the government is manufacturing or controlling the direction of hurricanes and where they're going. That is case closed, at least from my experience.
Awesome. Sam Brock, thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Want to go to Guad Vaniga, standing by for us in Fort Myers. You got these tornadoes, Guad, right? We've been talking a lot about kind of the storm surge, the wind, the rain, and then these tornadoes took this region kind of by surprise, even before Hurricane Milton had a chance to make landfall, by the way. How are folks rebuilding tonight?
Yasmin, for a lot of the residents in these areas affected by the tornadoes, the damage happened before the hurricane even made landfall. You can see some of the damage behind me. This looks like a war zone. This is one of the properties that was affected. This, by the way, is the roof of a house that is in front of me. So that roof was on the back side of this house. There is now a hole over it. I spoke to the owner a few minutes ago who told me he's getting his own crew to begin the cleanup process, but it's hard to pick a spot. You've got more stuff here. If you look up in the trees, there's utility poles in there, with cables and just all sorts of damage. So the governor is giving people, or authorities here, they are giving people a few days to begin the cleanup process in these areas affected by some of these tornadoes. They want people to put all of that debris out front so that they can begin cleaning things up. They're also asking these residents in these areas where they have the power lines that were affected to be very careful, because some of those can still be dangerous, but it's going to take time, especially for someone that has this type of damage. I mean, the owner said to me, I really don't know where to start. For now, I'm figuring out getting a crew to get in here and start cleaning things up. But this is the type of destruction that people came back to for those that evacuated the area, and some that were here. I've spoken to a lot of the residents in this neighborhood, and they were here when the tornadoes were making their way through, and they talk about what it was like. They said it felt like the tornado went by and then came back. There were many reports of these tornadoes. We still have to get confirmation of where these tornadoes took place, but this is the damage that we're seeing. Again, all of this happened before the hurricane even made landfall, Yasmin.
So I'm wondering, a lot of times when I've covered hurricanes and tornadoes before, a lot of times you would see complete and utter destruction of one home, and then it seemed like a home next to it that was totally untouched, in pristine condition. Because you had a combination of these tornadoes and this kind of hurricane, these surges, the wind, are you seeing that there as well?
So, Yasmin, in this particular neighborhood, we're seeing damage that resembles what a tornado can do. And it's interesting because you come into the neighborhood and you see this house is perfect, this house is perfect, but then you see these two houses are damaged, and you can see the path that the tornado took. And the path went right above me, and it looks like it came this way, and then it went through in that direction. You can see a utility pole that was broken in half over here. The owner here tells me that many of these objects did not come from his house. Sam was just talking about how people have found refrigerators that didn't belong to them. Well, he's telling me that a lot of this stuff came from the building on the other side. So it looks like the damage goes in a line in that direction, then turns, and it goes down this street. All the other houses here are fine. I asked the residents if they had any damage from the hurricane, the rain, or the wind. They said that was minor. What they did get was a lot of vegetation, branches, and trees that did fall during the hurricane, and they are already cleaning that up in this neighborhood.
Guad Venegas for us. Thank you, Guad. Appreciate it. We're going to have much more coverage on the aftermath of the hurricane later on in the show with Marissa Parra. We want to get some breaking news just into us. We're just learning the name of the victim in that elevator malfunction at a tourist mine in Colorado. 46-year-old Patrick Weir was one of the tour guides, the Molly Kathleen gold mine in Cripple Creek. Two groups of tourists were visiting the mine when the elevator actually stopped working. One group was stranded 1,000 feet underground for 7 hours. The other group trapped in the elevator shaft, that is the group Weir was in. The other 11 people, including 2 children, by the way, were rescued. 4 of them were hurt. Liz Croyce is joining us now with more on this. Talk us through, Liz, if you will, what we're learning tonight about the person who died and how the community is responding.
Yeah, Yasmin, so as you mentioned, he worked here at this gold mine. We don't know for how long, but it seems that he was certainly a vital part of the mine and the community here. In fact, earlier today, another employee who works here was in tears, essentially, or on the verge of tears. It was clearly a very sad day for the folks who work here. This is a mine that's been operating for decades, operating these tours, and it's family-owned and family-run. And what we know about Patrick Weir is that he not only works here, but he had just gotten training to become a firefighter. He's a father of a 7-year-old boy. His ex-wife still lives in the community and rushed over here during the rescue yesterday to be here as well as this was all unfolding. This is a very tight-knit community. It's a historic mining community. And so this is having a major impact on so many of the people here. Those that were trapped, though, those mostly or all of them were tourists from out of state because this is such a popular tourist destination. Those people, thankfully, are safe. The city put them up in hotels for the night. And now many of them, I think, are still quite traumatized by the situation, have not wanted to speak out yet, but are still reeling for what they experienced. Yasmin.
In the last hour, you talked about how the season closes for the tour groups, I believe, on Sunday. What does that mean kind of for the investigation going forward, especially after this tragedy?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that timing sort of aligns there because they were already going to be closing anyway. It is closed now indefinitely for the moment. The investigation will continue, and I mentioned to you before that OSHA is now involved. But there's not a lot of blame here that we're feeling from the community, from the sheriff, from the mayors that have come forward to speak. They all talk about how incredible this family is and how they hope to see this mine reopen. Yasmin.
All right, Liz Kurtz for us. Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. In the last hour, everybody, former President Trump wrapping up a speech in one city that he's targeted with lies about immigrants. We're talking about Aurora, Colorado. It's a city much different, by the way, for instance, from Springfield, Ohio. It's got a couple 100,000 people. It's diverse. And if you hear Mr. Trump tell it, it's overrun by a Venezuelan gang camped out in the apartment complex you see here. And he's saying today that he wants to use a 226-year-old law to deport people who he says commit, in his words, by the way, rampant migrant crime.
I will rescue Aurora and every town that has been invaded and conquered. We will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail or kick them out of our country, and we will be very, very effective in doing it.
There is no evidence, by the way, that undocumented immigrants are driving a crime surge in cities both like Aurora and nationwide. Vaughn Hilliard is in Indian Wells, California, near where the former president is going to be this weekend to talk more about this. Even, by the way, Vaughn, have Republicans, like the city's mayor, that have told our team that the former president needs to stop spreading these claims.
Right, because it's misrepresenting what is actually happening in these cities and in these communities. And, well, of course, there are serious crimes that are committed by undocumented individuals. There are murders, there are rapes, but those are anecdotal situations that Donald Trump is using to paint a broader picture of an undocumented population in the United States that is anywhere from 15 to 20 million individuals. And as you said it, there's a lower incarceration rate of undocumented individuals to U.S.-born citizens. I want to let folks listen to Mayor Kaufman of Aurora, who talked with our own colleague and friend Gabe Gutierrez recently about his city. He's a former Republican congressman, current Republican mayor. Take a listen.
I want to show him this city. I want to show him that the narrative is not accurate by any stretch of the imagination. And then the narrative is hurtful in some respects, but it's harmful to our local economy.
Mayor Kaufman was not at Donald Trump's rally this afternoon in Aurora, Colorado. Of course, Colorado is gone for Democratic presidential candidates several cycles in a row, and no different should be expected this go around. But Donald Trump wanted to highlight what he calls migrant crime to try to spur turnout and draw attention to the number of migrants, 1 million of migrants that have come into the United States during the Biden-Harris administration, and try to capitalize politically on calling for a need to address the situation at the border, and as he is calling for the deportation of undocumented immigrants inside of the United States already.
So while we're talking about that, I want to talk about the next trip as well, the next stop, I should say, in Reno, Nevada. It's the 10th trip for the former president so far. He actually believes his silver bullet there is going to be no tax on tips. Walk us through that.
Right. This is a state that he lost in 2020, narrowly, though, and the Republicans have lost their Senate seats there several election cycles in a row, though narrowly. And Donald Trump believes that he can make inroads, especially around the no tax on tips proposal that he has put forward. Of course, there's a large labor part of the electorate. There's also a large Latino part of the electorate. And Donald Trump is trying to broaden his appeal. And that's why you've seen him spend so much time in Nevada here over the course of the last several months, including tonight for a rally in Reno.
You okay, Vaughn?
I'm all good.
Okay, good. Okay, good. You probably, I bet you had that umbrella drop, didn't you? That's happened to us a couple times before. We've been standing right next to each other, my friend. You know how it works. I do know how it works. Real quick, Vaughn, while I have you, why is the former president headed to the Coachella Valley this weekend?
I'll be needing that umbrella tomorrow because we're going to be out an outdoor rally, not at the music festival Coachella, but instead a Donald Trump rally Coachella, which I should say I've been covering, elections and campaigns for about the last decade, and the campaign trail has never brought me to the Palm Springs area, let alone a month before the general election, and let alone with a Republican candidate for president. Donald Trump lost California by 5 million votes in 2020, though he claims wrongly that he won it in 2020. And he is again using a blue city, a blue state as a backdrop to try to highlight that Republicans should be in control of places like California and that there would be better outcomes. And so that's why you see him less a month in before the election going and holding a rally in Coachella, California. Yes,
there you go. By the way, I gotta love your reflexes, though. Even if I think back to the kind of the movement that you made to your left. I mean, those are some reflexes, Von Hilliard. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. We'll do a replay of that later on. All right, Vice President Kamala Harris is headed back to Washington, but she's also eyeing the Southwest. In the last couple of hours, she's emphasizing a country over party message to voters in Scottsdale.
Do we stand together as Americans, being our first identity, and come together around these issues?
So what is this, right? It's part of this all-out blitz, not just by the VP and her running mate, Tim Walz, but look at this map. You've got former President Obama making a couple trips out west, former President Clinton headed down south, First Lady Jill Biden, pretty much in any swing state that you can name. And with all that, we've got David Noriega for us in Phoenix. Let's talk about these surrogates, David. Why does she have Obama, Clinton out there in these types of events in these particular states, in this particular, by the way, moment, just really kind of days away from the election?
Yeah, Yasmin, I mean, it's all about the race to 270 votes in the Electoral College, right? We're at a point where every single one of these swing states is pretty much a toss-up. The race is incredibly close across the map. The campaigns, the sort of general sense among the campaigns is that the clearest road for Harris to get to 270 is through those northern blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. But if she loses any of those, which is entirely within the realm of possibility, then she is going to need to pick something up in the Sun Belt, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina. Now, she is sending these surrogates to the places where they are perhaps most popular and where their message might resonate the most. Bill Clinton, for example, he's going to the South, Georgia and North Carolina. He is from the South. He's popular in the South. Barack Obama is, among Democrats, he's pretty much popular everywhere. That's why he was in Pennsylvania yesterday making an appeal specifically to black male voters. This is the Harris campaign, and the Trump campaign is doing its own version of this, but this is the Harris campaign trying to cover all of the bases at once with as many tools as it has in its disposal. Yasmin?
Let's talk about Obama for a moment. We're seeing images of him right here addressing black male voters, right? This gender gap kind of that we're seeing particularly amongst black male voters and feeling as if Obama is the conduit to that. Let's take a listen to him and then we'll talk.
I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, I'm speaking to men directly, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
What's the sense this is going to resonate with black male voters that right now are not pulling a lever for Harris?
Yeah, I mean, Yasmin, so let's just quickly talk about some numbers that'll shed some light on this. If you look at approval within the universe of black voters for Kamala Harris, the total number for all black voters is 73% approved, right? Much substantially higher for women, 78% for black women. And for black men, it is substantially lower, 68%. That's a full 10 points lower than it is among black women. Conversely, for Donald Trump, the approval among black men is substantially higher than it is with black women, even though across the board it's lower than it is for Kamala Harris. So this is one of those demographics where Kamala Harris and the Democrats are losing ground in general, and particularly losing ground when you look at male voters. It's the same thing, by the way, for Latino voters who are critical in these southwestern states. And the Harris campaign seems to be putting a lot of resources into targeting those exact demographics, kind of shoring up those losses before November. Yasmin?
All right, David Noriega for us. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Tonight, officials want to know exactly what caused a chemical leak at a Texas oil plant that killed 2 people and sent dozens more to the hospital. The release of the toxic hydrogen sulfide gas shut down both sides of a major highway and put the entire city of Deer Park into a shelter-in-place mode. People were told to keep their windows and their doors closed, turn off their air conditioning as well. Investigators apparently had to wait it out for hours until it was safe to enter the area. Luckily, it seems the situation is contained, with city officials lifting the shelter in place after air monitoring showed no risk to the area. Kathy Park joins me now with more. Things stand now in terms, Kathy, of this investigation and the safety of the community. How sure are they that things are okay?
Yeah, so Yasmin, as of 9:30 last night, the shelter-in-place order was lifted after air monitoring reports found no hazardous pollutants in the area. The Pemex facility where this all took place released a statement saying that the incident was contained to their site and has been isolated. They're not detecting any off-site impacts right now. They also said that residents could actually see flaring continue as they try to contain the situation. But as far as the cause of the leak, it's still very much under investigation. But it's also worth noting, Yasmin, that during what was a pretty volatile situation last night, the city of Deer Park experienced some technical difficulties with their emergency alert system, leaving many residents really in the dark about breaking news happening in their backyard. The city said some residents may have even received notices with incorrect spelling and grammar and may have even gotten some duplicate notifications as well. So the emergency response citywide is also under review.
Yeah, not a good time for the emergency response to go haywire. I want to talk about the 35 people or so that were hurt. What do we know about them?
So, Yasmin, this was a deadly incident as well. 2 people were killed, and we're told by the company 35 workers were affected as well. Pemex, they did release a statement earlier this afternoon saying that 13 workers are currently hospitalized, but they are in stable condition. But, Yasmin, it's worth noting that hydrogen sulfide, it is a highly toxic and flammable gas. It's typically used for gas and oil refining, for paper processing. So if someone is surrounded by this gas, enclosed in a tight space, it can be extremely dangerous, as we saw overnight.
All right, Kathy Park. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. We have some breaking news. The Justice Department is suing Virginia. The Fed saying the state is illegally trying to remove voters too close to the election. You see the statement there saying canceling registration within 90 days puts qualified voters in jeopardy and creates confusion for the electorate. It's the second time this year the DOJ is going after a state for these alleged violations. The other one, by the way, Alabama. We just got a statement from Virginia's Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, saying it's a desperate attempt to attack the legitimacy of elections in Virginia. We're going to keep you posted on any details here and how it might impact voters in the coming days. All right, coming up, Elon Musk's next, I should say, big adventure, a self-driving car without a steering wheel or pedals. We're going to tell you why a whole lot of people have a lot of safety concerns over Tesla's Cybercab. Plus, the surprising reason audience members needed medical attention after going to the opera. We'll explain. Tonight, Tesla's value tumbling down over $60 billion. At one point, shares dropping as much as 10% today as questions grow about the safety and the reliability of Tesla's long-awaited Cybercab after Elon Musk unveiled the new electric robotaxi dedicated to self-driving at this big, splashy event in the Hollywood studio last night. The robotaxi has no steering wheels, no pedals, but Musk says these self-driving cars are expected to be 10 to 20 times safer than human-driven cars. Something to think about, by the way, as we already lose about 3,000 people in the U.S. every single year in car accidents because of distracted driving. But fans who think this all sounds good, they're going to have to wait until 2026 at least before getting in one of these robo-taxis. I want to bring in Brian Chung to talk more about this. Let's talk, Brian, if we can, about the hurdles first here that Musk and Tesla have to get through before they're even bringing these things possibly to market in 2026.
Yeah, well, Yasmin, first off, there's actually producing the vehicle itself, the Cybercab. And we have to remember that Tesla has had a history of missing the goalposts, if you will, on when they deliver these vehicles. With the Cybertruck, for example, they were promising that they would have something out in 2021. It wasn't until the end of 2023 that they were able to release that vehicle. So for the Cybercabs, yes, they're hoping to get to 2026, but who knows what production delays they might get or hit on the way to getting to that point. Now, the other side of this equation is just the implementation of the robo-taxi technology. Again, what they're imagining here is a world where you don't own your vehicle. If you need to get from point A to point B, you hail this car that has no steering wheel and no pedals, and it'll drive you to your destination entirely autonomously. You can imagine there's going to be a lot of regulatory hurdles in terms of getting that onto the road. Yeah. Every state has its own laws, and then you also need really mass adoption. You need a lot of Cybercabs out there for that technology to really work. Sure, it worked on a lot over on Warner Brothers, only a few miles away from where I'm standing right now. But can it handle real-life world road situations? That's an open question. Yes.
So let's draw on that, if we can, Brian, for a moment, right? Because some of the criticism that Musk and Tesla are getting is kind of not necessarily talking enough about the technology, explaining what is actually happening here to make people feel safe to one day be able to get into one of these robotaxis, right? So what do folks feel like they need to hear? What do you need to hear in order to safely get into one of these things?
Yeah, and again, what was unveiled yesterday was largely conceptual. I mean, you have to admit, it was just super cool to see, right? They had all the lights down low. It looked like some sort of, Blade Runner type of situation with all these cars driving around. But Elon didn't really explain the inners of how the robotaxi technology works. How does it interact in real life with, a situation where you have cars swerving around? He was saying that AI is going to be a large part of the answer there, but what underlies that AI? What's the engineering software behind that? We just didn't get the details on that type of thing because, again, this is pretty early on in its development. We know maybe what it's going to look like, but the inners of it are still largely a black box. So we have to remember that there are regulatory hurdles around this. There's the NHTSA, which kind of supervises at the federal level safety of vehicles that are broadly on the road, and they have had concerns with the full self-driving technology in some Tesla vehicles. There was a critical safety gap that they described as the issue that contributed to at least 467 collisions and 14 deaths in their analysis. Could that also be a hurdle for this robotaxi technology? You would have to imagine so. But again, we're in the early aughts of this, and we'll have to see how Tesla kind of plays ball with regulators, Yasmin.
You're right, though, in saying that it is pretty incredible to see and cool to see with all the lights and the way that it's shaped and the way that it's designed and the possibilities that could exist with this self-driving vehicle or this robotaxi per se. The question is when we're actually going to decide it's okay to get hit for one of those. That's what it's really going to come down to. Brian Chung, thank you. Appreciate it. Want to get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Boeing announcing that it's cutting 10% of its workforce, about 17,000 people. It's coming as thousands of Boeing workers, they've been on strike for about a month now. And just a couple of days ago, the company withdrew its latest offer to the union. Boeing's new CEO saying, quote this, "Our business is in a difficult position, and it is hard to overstate the challenges that we face together." Number 2, a U.S. Army soldier sentenced to 14 years in prison today for attempting to help the Islamic State conduct a deadly ambush of U.S. troops. Cole Bridges was charged back in 2021 and pled guilty to terrorism charges last year. After his sentence is over, he's going to undergo supervised release for 10 years, according to the DOJ. Number 3, whooping cough, now spreading across the country, the highest levels in a decade. More than 16,000 cases just this year. That is more than 4 times the amount that we'd seen by this time last year. Experts are saying that the higher numbers could be a result of people getting behind on their vaccines and doctors testing for whooping cough more now. Number 4, officials saying some parts of the Midwest and Northeast, they may get to see the northern lights again tonight. The lights dazzling skies as yet another series of unusually strong solar storms hits Earth. People as far south as Florida got to see the stunning, colorful skies last night. Number 5, Natalie Nakase making history, becoming the WNBA's first Asian American head coach. She's going to lead the Golden State Valkyries, a WNBA expansion team that will start playing next year. Nakase spent 3 seasons with the Las Vegas Aces. She says it was always a dream of hers to work for Golden State. All right, coming up. Protests breaking out in a city in southern Mexico just days after the former mayor was, in fact, beheaded. Florida's no longer forever. Why longtime residents might not come back after this latest hurricane. We'll be right back. All right, I want to take you back now to our top story of the night, the aftermath of Hurricane Milton, having been hit first by Hallie a couple of weeks ago, and now Milton. A lot of longtime locals, they want to leave. They want out. It's part of this kind of broader undoing of Florida's Great Migration. The state saw this population boom in the last couple of years. People were moving south for Florida's sun, their sand, their weather, obviously. More than 700,000 people moved to the state in 2022, and it was the second fastest growing state of last year. But now you've got these growing concerns over these hurricanes and the rising cost of insurance, repairs that come after. It has people rethinking those decisions. I want to bring in Marissa Parra, who's in St. Petersburg, Florida, for us to talk more about this. The housing market, Marissa, is a reflection of what we're actually seeing here, right? In real time. Inventory up. Interest, though, it's slowing down.
And it is exactly what we're hearing and seeing on the ground, Yasmin. And this is something that we're hearing today. And frankly, even before Hurricane Hallie and Hurricane Milton, it's something that we've been reporting on the ground for the better part of a year. So I want to take you to what our teams put together, this graphic that kind of visualizes what we're seeing and hearing in terms of those numbers, the supply and demand imbalance. These are some of the top cities in Florida, and these are the supply and demand changes from a year earlier. These are percentages. On the right, you have the supply, and on the left in red, the demand. So you can see that massive imbalance, particularly in a city like Tampa, which is nearby where we are. We're in the Tampa Bay area. This is St. Petersburg specifically, but we're all kind of seeing the same thing across cities. And Yasmin, there's a couple of reasons for that and a couple of statistics to throw at you. When we have a disaster like this, of course, there's so many questions on insurance, and they need to lean on insurance. Well, we've already talked about insurance companies either scaling back or pulling out altogether. Citizen, which is the so-called insurer of last resort, they just raised their premiums. We've heard this from people we interviewed today. So as they're cleaning out their belongings, by the way, you can see the debris behind me. These are treasured pieces in a home that they once thought to build in. The woman we spoke to today, she thought she was going to retire here. Now she's saying that she wants out. Another woman we just heard from, actually, I want to take you to what we heard from her, how she came here with big dreams. And then, of course, so many of these people are finding they're just crushed by these natural disasters and massive price hikes. Take a listen.
It's sad, but it's almost like I feel like it'll be relief to get out of here because this is such a horrible way to live.
And according to Redfin, Yasmin, nearly 12% of homeowners say they plan to leave the state of Florida because of rising insurance costs.
Wow.
Yasmin?
Those are some major stats. I want to kind of remind folks, if we can for a moment, Marissa, about kind of the Great Migration, right? The folks that had left and gone to Florida, especially in the year 2022, and why that happened.
Well, especially in those years during and since the pandemic in 2020, I think a lot of people were trapped in their homes and they were thinking, wow, well, if I'm going to be stuck here, I want to have a nice open space. And so it was idyllic for some people to move down here because they were thinking about quality of life. So I think a lot of people were kind of allured by this promise of coastal views and warm sunshine year round. And that's at least what I'm hearing from people on the ground. The majority, of course, there's going to be other reasons maybe why people moved down here. Politics sometimes is the reason why either people do come down here or decide to leave. But I think sunshine was overwhelmingly the one thing that kind of brought everyone together here. And now, overwhelmingly, people saying it's just not worth it. I'll take the cold winters and the blizzards in return for not having to deal with this.
Yeah, the realities of climate change and these catastrophic storms. Marissa Paraforce, thank you. Appreciate it. So NBC covers hundreds of international stories every day. And because it's tough to read, to watch, or listen to all of them, our teams around the world, they have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment that we call The Global. In the UK, London police reporting 40 new allegations against the late billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed, accusing him of rape and sexual assault. Fayed is the father of the man killed alongside Princess Diana in a car crash back in 1997. The latest accusations now coming from a BBC investigation and documentary, alleging this took place over the course of almost 35 years. It follows similar claims from dozens of his former Harrods employees. NBC News reached out to the Al Fayed family and have not yet heard back. In Mexico, thousands of protesters lining the streets today demanding justice after a local mayor was brutally killed earlier this week. We told you Alejandro Arcos Catalón was in office for less than a week before he was found decapitated inside a car. Protesters are now calling on authorities to find whoever's responsible. And then over in Germany, a night at the opera gone wrong after more than a dozen audience members needed medical attention during a performance of a raunchy-sounding show. A spokesperson for the opera telling NBC News that people, they felt sick, they felt dizzy. Some even fell unconscious afterwards. Apparently, the show is based on an opera from the 1920s, but this version has pretty explicit scenes showing self-harm, naked roller skating, and lots of blood. The Opera House says their team had the situation under control at all times. All right, Russian President Vladimir Putin today in a landmark first meeting with Iran's new president Pezeshkian, saying the two share a, quote, very close worldview, an understanding that is causing concern in the United States. It is a huge meeting for these two leaders who are both fighting these sort of proxy wars with the United States. They met on the sidelines of a larger conference of leaders from the region celebrating growing economic ties between Russia and Iran and similar views on world affairs. It's coming at a time when Tehran is supplying weapons for Moscow's war in Ukraine, with the Middle East bracing for Israel's response to Tehran's largest ever missile attack last week. Danielle Hamamdjian is joining us now with more. Walk us through, Danielle, if you will, what else we know about this meeting between Putin and the Iranian President Pezeshkian, and how much of a concern is this globally?
Well, these are two international pariahs. They've been isolated by the international community. They've both been sanctioned by the West. And so they look to each other for assistance, and they look to each other to do business. And according to Iranian state television, the newly elected president, Mr. Pezeshkian, was quoted as saying today that they are much closer to each other, these two countries, than any other nations. Why is it a concern? Well, look at their foreign policies. For Iran, it boils down to two things. One, the destruction of Israel, and two, the reduction, or to completely eliminate, if you will, the American influence in the Middle East. For Russia's Vladimir Putin, well, he just wants an entirely new world order, one that doesn't include the West, one that doesn't include the United States. And so the U.S. has accused Iran of shipping short-range ballistic missiles to Russia for its war in Ukraine, something Tehran denies. And for its part, Iran has also, according to analysts, looking to Russia to upgrade, to replace its aging fleet of fighter jets. I mean, as one military analyst put it to me, its most modern fighter jet is from the 1980s. Iran's Air Force is practically obsolete.
Yeah. So with that all in mind, as we kind of talk about the rising tensions in the Middle East, you have the ongoing, essentially, violence in Lebanon that has been continuously escalating. You have Iran kind of on edge, waiting for retaliation from Israel. What do we know about the state of play there? If we know how Israel is going to retaliate, when they're going to retaliate, or if they plan on doing it inside Lebanese borders?
Right. And so, well, according to two diplomats from the region, it appears that Iran has been telling Arab nations in the Gulf, do not open your airspace to any retaliatory strike from Israel, or else. That or else means that they will be considered as being part of this war. They will be considered participants, and therefore targeting them would be fair game. Now, according to U.S. officials telling NBC tonight that the United States does not believe Israel will be conducting an assassination in Israel. It does not believe that Israel will be targeting nuclear sites. If it did, by the way, it would need the assistance of the United States. And so officials also are telling NBC that U.S. is poised to defend its assets in the region, 40,000 troops, multiple bases in the region. And the U.S. does not believe, will not be, rather, providing any direct military support to this operation. So it's not a question of if this is going to happen. It's very much a question of when and how hard is Israel going to hit back.
All right, Danielle Hamamdjian, thank you, Danielle. Appreciate it. The 2024 Nobel Peace Prize awarded today to a Japanese anti-nuclear weapon group formed by atomic bombing survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Nobel Committee says the group's work significantly contributed to the establishment of what's called the nuclear taboo, where no nuclear bomb has been used for close to 80 years. The group has been campaigning against nuclear weapons for decades, using their personal stories to educate people around the world about living with the physical effects of radiation exposure and the psychological impacts of surviving a nuclear bomb. I want to bring in Janice Mackey-Frere for us, who's got more on this. Janice, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Tell us more about this group, their mission, and their reaction to this award.
Yes, and Nihon Hidankyo was formed in 1956, and they have spent literally decades sharing their experiences of the hardship that has come with being living memorials of these atomic blasts in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What they saw was unthinkable. The bombs killing an estimated 200,000 people. The survivors today were children then or not yet born, and they emerged from ruined cities and devastated families to the long-term physical effects of radiation exposure, as well as social stigma and survivor's guilt. In their founding statement, they allude to have been silent and hiding and now sharing their stories of pain and loss of what nuclear war can bring. And for years, they felt shunned in Japan, where they're known as hibakusha, people affected by bombs. So today, for many, this recognition was overdue. They've been nominated twice before. Toshiyuki Mamaki is the group's co-chair, and he's a survivor. And he broke down when the award was announced. He said, it can't be real. Yes.
Incredible moment for them, and a real full circle moment for them and the important work they do every day. Janice Mackey-Fairforth, thank you. Appreciate it. Still ahead, everybody, former President Trump's got a less than flattering biopic hitting theaters tonight. Why his campaign sued to keep you from seeing it. All right, welcome back. Perhaps the most controversial movie of this award season hits theaters tonight, and it's on a topic that we've already talked about in this show.
Hello, this is Donald Trump from Mr. Cohn. Thank you so much.
Donald who?
That is a clip from The Apprentice. It's a film that made waves at the Cannes Film Festival, all about the former president's early days with his late fixer, Roy Cohn. Now the former president's campaign is hoping you're not going to see it, calling it pure malicious defamation and garbage. They even sued to try and stop it, to no avail, by the way. And the actor playing Cohn, Jeremy Strong, says it is essential viewing before Election Day.
The movie's not trying to tell you who to vote for. It's trying to inform people about what made Donald Trump, what shaped Donald Trump, how he became the person he is today, how we got to where we got to today.
Steve Patterson in Reno, Nevada for us. Joining us now with more on this. We've heard a lot about Roy Cohn over the last couple of years, especially since Donald Trump took to the political stage. We've learned a lot about him as well, and especially a lot about the former president's history in New York City as a real estate magnate, per se. This is not a flattering portrayal of the former president.
Yeah, you know, I've been told that certain members at NBC News have been given a screener. I have not seen it, so I'm only going based on the reporting from people that have seen that screener. But what I've heard, I would say brutal is a good adjective for it. This is the portrayal of a man who obviously they want to show somebody that is sympathetic and sort of an origin story, but also someone that is involved in a lot. Apparently in this movie, there are scenes of sex parties, of Trump abusing weight loss medication, which he's denied, Trump getting liposuction and scalp enhancement surgery, which he's denied. The worst thing that I've heard, though, is that there actually is a scene in this movie where Trump sexually assaults his ex-wife, Ivana Trump, which is obviously taken from a deposition of their 1990 divorce. So there's some basis of truth in it, although Ivana has later denied it, and Trump later, of course, refutes it as well. So what's true and what's not, what's salacious and what is more factual, I don't think we'll have a clear picture on. The point is, obviously, anybody inside Trump's camp would not want you to see this, based on what I'm reading.
Yeah, and by the way, all that you just laid out there is one of the reasons why this thing almost didn't get made.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem about this. None of the major Hollywood studios picked this up. It ran through a very small distributor. And part of the reason for that is because we all know how litigious Donald Trump and his camp are. In fact, they've already sent cease and desist letters to the movie's director and producer. We have a statement from the Trump campaign, or a spokesperson from the Trump camp. He said, quote, "The film is pure malicious defamation, should have never seen the light of day, and doesn't even deserve a place in the straight-to-DVD section at a bargain bin at a soon-to-be-closed discount movie store. Ouch. It belongs in a dumpster fire." The director has tried to clarify his position, saying, look, this is not a hit job. He was trying to do a realistic portrait of a person that would be involved in something like this in New York that became the man that we all know. That's Ali Abbasi. He said this, quote, "You might find some of these character questions you have about Trump answered. The bigger point we're trying to make in the movie is the political theater has been going on for a long time in this country." The movie's out in like maybe 1,700 select theaters or so. Pretty limited release, so I don't think this is going to be the October surprise that many may have hoped for. But I do think it's going to make waves based on obviously what I've been reading.
It'll be interesting to see how many folks actually get out to see it, especially between now and the November elections. Steve Patterson, thank you. Appreciate it. Still to come, everybody. Could seaweed save the planet? How it could fix cow burps. Yeah, you heard me right. Cow burps that affect the climate. I'll be right back. Welcome back to tonight's Original Now with in-depth reporting on a topic that we've been watching, climate change, making a real impact on all of our lives. You've seen the devastation throughout tonight's show. Some scientists now say they found a way to help make it better, and it involves seaweed and cow burps. NBC's Christine Romans has the story.
There's no question, beef is big.
Beef, it's what's for dinner.
The world produces an estimated 160 billion pounds of it each year. But research shows the world's 1.5 billion cattle have an outsized impact on the climate. They use up a ton of water, and their manure can pollute waterways. But one impact is easier to hear than see. That's a cow burping out methane, a greenhouse gas that builds up in a cow's 4 stomachs as it digests food. Globally, cattle emit more than 231 billion pounds of methane into the atmosphere every year, tagging them as the biggest agricultural source of greenhouse gases worldwide. One solution to this turf problem could come from the surf.
This seaweed is somewhat of the holy grail of, climate change in terms of solutions from the ocean.
Dr. Jen Smith is researching how this species of seaweed, called Asparagopsis taxiformis, can stop all that burping.
Once it is fed to the livestock, it simply prevents methane from ever being formed, and therefore the cows don't burp that methane out of their mouth.
One study found that adding just a tiny amount of this red seaweed to a cow's diet reduced its methane emissions between 40 and 98%. Now Dr. Smith is partnering with an Australian company to scale up production.
The goal is not how do we produce it. We know how to do that, but how we do it more efficiently.
Steve Meller's company CH4 Global makes a red seaweed-based feed additive called Methane Tamer. It's already being fed to cattle in Australia with plans to grow it worldwide. The goal is to perfect the process of growing Asparagopsis in outdoor grow ponds that can be built anywhere with access to ocean water.
We're giving people the choice to say, do I eat that plant-based approach or do I eat that meat-based approach that has now dramatically lowered its carbon footprint?
Meller expects to see low methane beef in U.S. supermarkets by the beginning of next year. But he has some big hurdles to clear, like getting the FDA and Congress to agree on how to regulate the seaweed additive, something CH4 is working with lawmakers to change. And the whole idea has some experts skeptical.
I don't want to say it would do nothing, but just wouldn't do enough.
Jan Dukevich points to recent studies that show less exciting results from red seaweed and says that the only way to significantly reduce methane emissions is to grow and eat fewer cows.
Well, I think if we're talking about making large-scale changes in the food system, we really need to think about the what and not the how of what we're producing.
Still, to Steve Meller, it's full steam ahead.
Little seaweed with a big footprint.
The little engine that could, so to speak, and it's red too.
Red seaweed for a greener future. Christine Romans, NBC News.
Red seaweed, no burps. Christine, thank you so much. That wraps it up for this hour. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.